Welcome to A Warm Embrace, where we believe in the transformative power of touching lives and embracing communities through the power of captivating stories. Sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in the warmth of the A Warm Embrace podcast.
Hi, Guillermo. How are you?
Hi, John. How are you? I'm doing well. Thank you.
Well, I'm good. So it's nice to see you again here in your podcast in a warm embrace.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Today, I'll be asking you again a few questions that I think might help me and the viewers.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm excited.
Let's start. The title for this episode is Overcoming Obstacles, Inspiring Stories of Resilience and Triumph. So the question is, obstacles can sometimes feel insurmountable. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, insurmountable.
Leading to feelings of hopelessness. How can we shift our mindset to see obstacles as opportunities for growth and transformation?
Ooh, that one is a very good question. And recently I've actually been working on that because last year we had some issues with regard to our business. And I don't know if I've told you this, but I guess I'll go ahead and share the story with regard to, so that our followers can hear. Last year, Dorota and I were in Africa and we had an amazing trip. And so we were feeling like we were on top of the world. Everything was doing really well with our business. And then all of a sudden we get back from Africa, and then we started noticing some issues in our business, some issues with our employees, some issues with our clients. And I was wondering, like, my biggest question was, how can I go from being on such a high in Africa, having experienced such beautiful memories and beautiful experiences with wonderful friends and people, and then coming back and to what can be described as a professional low. And I spent months trying to go ahead and I was asking myself that question, how can I go from a high to a low? But I eventually started through the help of some books that I was reading. I came across a passage about asking the question, what's the gift? And then I proceeded with, what's the gift? What's the blessing? What is the lesson? And I think that really changed the perspective for me, because at the end of the day, any challenge is an opportunity for growth. Any challenge is just us waiting to flourish. And at the end of the day, I don't know if you've ever heard, John, the story of the caterpillar that turns into the butterfly. And I've always loved that story because when I first heard it, I actually felt compelled to relate to the person. And so the story goes along the lines of this. So there's this one time there's this caterpillar in the backyard of a gardener. And so the gardener sees the caterpillar, and all of a sudden the caterpillar starts going through the whole process of changing into of transforming into the butterfly. It starts creating its pupa. It starts going into its cocoon, and then eventually, as time passes, the gardener starts noticing that the caterpillar, or the butterfly rather, starts emerging from its cocoon. And as it's emerging every single day, the gardener's excited to see it. And as it's seeing the caterpillar, or the butterfly rather, emerge, it starts seeing more and more of the butterfly, until eventually one day it stops. And so another day passes, and the gardener was concerned that the butterfly was not emerging. So what does the gardener do? He actually cuts a little bit of the cocoon in order to make it easier for the caterpillar or the butterfly to emerge. And when he does that, the butterfly emerges easily and without much hesitation. But when the butterfly comes out, it's a little bit distorted, or quite a bit distorted. And the wings are a bit shriveled up. It's unable to go ahead and sustain its body in flight. And the moral of that story, it results is the fact that the butterfly needed to go through the process of extracting itself from its cocoon, even in the most difficult of times, in order to be able to become the butterfly that it was destined to become. It needed to go ahead, and if I'm not mistaken, as far as the story, it needed to go ahead and squeeze itself through the cocoon in order to remove all of the excess liquid or moisture from the wings in order to eventually allow the butterfly its flight. And that was something that really came back to my mind last year, at the fact that when I needed to go ahead and think of what's the gift, what's the lesson, what's the blessing, because if it wasn't for those hardships that we all experience, we would not be greater. Or we would not, our circle of comfort would not expand. And that's another story that I want to share with you all, is that I was actually on a call with some friends. It was a Zoom call. It actually resulted from that trip in Africa, that a group of us, we all became really close friends, to the point that we created our own little family. And we all come to a meeting once a month. It's virtual, but we also try to go ahead and see whether we can all see each other, whether the people who live in close proximity with each other, we try to have dinner as often as we can. But at least once a month, the 17 or 18 of us, rather, we come together on a Zoom call and we share. And we were having a conversation in that one call, and one of the members, she mentioned about the story of greater circles of comfort. And she mentioned that she had come across a teaching that anytime we go through a challenge, anytime we go through a hardship, our circle of comfort becomes bigger. Why? Because at the end of the day, we've overcome something that we had previously been unable to overcome, or we had not been presented to overcome. And so once you overcome one challenge, or this particular challenge, then you know that you can overcome that challenge, which makes your circle of comfort all the more wider than it was before that challenge. So that was something that really struck a chord with me, when you have to go ahead and reframe the mental chatter and the thought process that we all have, especially in the midst of something negative, especially in the midst of adversity, because we need to go ahead and see, what lesson can we learn from this? What is the gift? What is the blessing? And going back to that story, as far as what we had to experience, we were able to see who were our true A players in our business. We were able to see what were our processes that we thought were working, and they weren't working at 100%. Where were the kinks? And being able to go back, being able to go ahead and look at, being able to go ahead and reevaluate has made us all the better for it. Of course, we're still growing from it, but without that, we wouldn't be growing. We would be in the same position. So in order to try to condense what I just said as the best as possible, it's the whole concept of reframing. And I guess the three best questions that I've found are my best questions in any moment of adversity or any moment of challenge, is that I ask myself, first, what's the gift? Second, what's the blessing? And third, what's the lesson? And when I actually take the time to be able to answer those three questions, then that challenge, that adversity, doesn't seem so daunting. It doesn't seem so insurmountable. And it becomes something that I want to go ahead and overcome, because it's only going to become better for me. So.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Guillermo. I think I really needed to hear those personal stories that you had, and thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I think it resonates with Proverbs or from Bible, that all things work together for our own good, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And yes, and going back to, of course, to the Bible, as the or the religious, is the fact that God doesn't give us anything. God doesn't give us something bigger than we can handle. And when we remember that, that's something that gives me comfort. It's like I know that I have God in my corner. And so if He's giving me something, if He's giving me this challenge that I that I am to go through, then that means that he thinks that I'm strong enough, that I'm prepared enough to be able to go ahead and make the most of it. So I take solace in that as well.
Thank you for that, Guillermo. I'm so grateful to hear those words and stories. Resilience is often built through adversity. How can we cultivate resilience in our own lives to better navigate challenges and setbacks? Why is this important?
Well, that goes back to that story, and I guess maybe I got a little bit ahead of myself when I told the story about that circle of comfort. And that resilience is our own personal armor. And at the end of the day, when I look at that as far as it being our personal armor, it's the fact that we are capable of much more than we think we can. And I think that's really something that we need to constantly remember or remind ourselves of. What with regard to resilience, even though my theme this week was adventure, but what I was able to experience and what I was able to do this past weekend is a form of resilience. I mean, I took a 12-hour walk, and
Wow.
that showed that, thank you, that 12-hour walk was something to go ahead and prove to myself what in fact I am capable of, what my body is capable of, what my mind is capable of. And just to briefly touch upon that 12-hour walk, what is the purpose of the 12-hour walk? It is a chance to connect with yourself. And when you take that time to actually go out and walk outdoors for 12 hours, completely disconnected by yourself, you begin to have these realizations. You begin to understand where your self-imposed limitations are. I mean, think about it, 12 hours walking. Of course, there were breaks in between, but I mean, many people have not done that, have not or think, actually, and more so think that they're incapable of doing it. And that's really the saddest part. Of course, there are physical limitations that we have to take into consideration when there are people that are physically unable to do it. I understand that, but there have been situations where people who you would think are physically incapable of doing something, they come around and they surprise us. And I think that's really the whole concept of what resilience is. It's where there's a will, there's a way. And if that's something that I've come to cherish, that's something that I've come to treasure, as far as understanding that if there's a will, and or where there is a will, there is a way, then we go for it. We take that step in that direction. And the more you do it, the more resilience builds, because you have that armor. It's how it is when you work out. So with regard to that question, John, as far as resilience is concerned, I think that resilience is a muscle, and it's just one of those muscles that need to continue to grow. And I think maybe I may have spoken a little bit too soon when I gave that story about that circle of comfort. But the truth of the matter is that every challenge makes us better. And I like to go ahead and take into consideration that resilience this is armor that we have to continue putting on. We have to continue building. And one of the realizations that I've come, or the correlations rather that I've come to think about when it comes to resilience, is the whole idea of when you work out. And as far as when you're working out, you at first, when you're using the weights, your hands become raw because they're not used to the weight that is being that new material that's against the hands. And eventually, as you continue doing it, you develop a callus or two, and that's because you are continuing with that endeavor. You're continuing to try to grow your muscles. And so that callus is a sign of resilience. It's a sign of you being able to overcome. It goes back to that saying, where there's a will, there's a way. And I've always known that. I've sometimes forgotten it, but the truth of the matter is that I always like to think that I come back to it. because yes, there's a solution to everything. There is a response to every challenge. And when we are able to overcome that challenge, we expand our circle of comfort. And the more we do that, the more resilient we become. That's where that whole armor comes from. That's why the armors become stronger. That's how our muscles become bigger. It's that muscle that we continue to work. And I think that's really the whole concept of it. If we were to go ahead and relate it back to the first question about changing that mindset of challenges and obstacles, if we actually embrace them and think that the more that we do it, the more resilient we become, then the stronger we become. And if we look at what's the lesson, what's the blessing, what's the gift, if anything, even if at the moment you're not seeing what the gift can really be, well, this is another challenge that I'm able to overcome. This is something that God is giving me because he feels and he knows that I'm prepared to take on. And even just that's a gift. That's a blessing. Just that is the gift or blessing. So I give that to you, John, and I give that to our viewers and our listeners, because sometimes when we're in the middle of it, it's really hard to actually think of what the gift or what the lesson is, right? Or what the blessing is. But if we actually think of it, if we actually have that as a basis, you know what? This challenge is going to make me stronger. This challenge is going to make me bigger. This challenge is going to grow my muscle. It's going to make me more resilient. Those are 4 gifts. Those are 4 blessings just right there that you can go ahead and latch onto in the middle of your trial, in the middle of your tribulation, in the middle of your challenge. And then once you're overcome it, then you can look back. Wow, look where I was able to accomplish. Look how far I was able to travel. Look how big that muscle of resilience was able to grow. Look how strong I am. And that is an additional form of resilience. That is an additional form of blessing. That's an additional gift that we have that we can give ourselves. And that in and of itself is awesome. I mean, you can see how excited I get about that, because at the end of the day, I've had my challenges. I've had my challenges, and I don't pretend to say that my challenges are in any way bigger than anybody else's, because as we discussed in episode 3, our challenges are not unique. They may seem unique to us, but they're not unique in the grand scheme of challenges. We've all experienced challenges, and when we see other people overcoming challenges, then that gives us the strength to be able to overcome our own. And that's the exciting part.
Agreed to that.
We don't want to let life beat us down. We don't want to let life win. We want to win life. And that's really the whole concept of resilience. That's where we see our own strength in being able to overcome those challenges. Because those challenges are going to come. They're
Yes.
going to come, and that's the one
Inevitable.
Yes, they're inevitable.
There are unlimited supplies of challenges in this universe.
Very much.
Overcoming obstacles often involves taking risk and stepping outside of our comfort zone, just like what you did. How can we embrace uncertainty and fear to pursue our dreams and aspiration?
Take the first step. It's just take the first step. And I'll share back to the whole concept of that 12-hour walk. The truth of the matter is that again, this past weekend I did a 12-hour walk. What that 12-hour walk was meant to do is really connect with myself. And when we go back to the whole idea of a 12-hour walk, how many people I am unable to imagine how many people think I can't do that. And the reason that I'm unable to imagine the amount is because that number is just so large. Because in a prior life or in a prior time in my life, I would have said, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't do a 12-hour walk." But you know what? You take the first step. And that's the interesting thing. Of one of the things that I learned on this challenge was the whole concept of there was no good reason for me not to do it. I want to let that sink in. There was no good reason for me not to do it. And there was also no good reason for me not to have done it this past weekend. And it was interesting because my wife asked me on Friday, oh, are you going to go ahead the day before the day that I went on the walk? She's like, oh, are you going to do your walk this weekend? And it was so funny because my mind started racing. It started going a mile a minute as to thinking, oh, all the things that I have to do. But as soon as the 100 things that came to my mind that I said to myself I had to do, I was able to make I had the realization rather that there's not one good reason for me not to do it. Everything else could wait. Everything else could wait. Everything else that I had planned on doing or that I wanted to do could wait. It did not have to be done that day. And so because there was no reason for me not to do it, the decision was I have to do it. Because it was funny because even on the days leading up to it, I was like thinking, oh, again, I have to do this. If I do it on Saturday, my entire Saturday is shot. So maybe if I go ahead and postpone it to the next Saturday, or then I postpone it to the next Saturday, and then the following weekend, I believe, is Easter, and then we're getting into the spring, and then we're doing different things that I have to do around the house, or I have to go ahead and concentrate on these items for work. And it's so interesting how easy it is to go ahead and place excuses. And then what ends up happening? The idea of that one thing that we wanted to do, or that one thing that we may have at one point, one brief fleeting moment, we were excited to do, then becomes an afterthought. It becomes something that is so far back in the back of our cupboards, in the back of our closets, that we may remember down the road, and we end up not doing it. And that's really the whole concept that goes back to that question that you just asked me, John. How do we overcome that uncertainty? Well, you make yourself certain. You make yourself certain because what is one thing that you can be certain of? At least in the example of the 12-hour walk, I was certain that I could take a first step. Literally take the first step. Yes. And that first step was walking out my door. And then what followed that first step? A second step. And I just continued. And then lo and behold, at the end of my journey, I was over 21 miles in, just walking, without being connected to anything, without having earphones in my ear, with the phone completely silenced. And it was just me and myself and nature. And then I was able to touch into some thoughts. And then I was able to come to some realizations, be able to connect with myself. And that is a form of making something certain out of something uncertain. So I think that the best thing that I can go ahead and advise, I guess the best counsel that I can go ahead and give when you ask that question, how can you take something where you're feeling uncertain? Well, take something that you're certain about and take a step toward that. And what's one thing that you know how to do? Take that step.
Well, thank you so much for that, Guillermo. I think it is also the power of intention, right? You have the intention to walk, intention to go outside. And then, to be honest with you, Guillermo, you also inspire me to run, to jog, to walk, because, you are a busy person, still you can do those activities. So how about us, right?
We're all busy. And that's the thing, John. It's like every one of us, no matter what it is that we do, we're all busy. It's just a matter of being able to prioritize some things. And some of the things, like, for example, I like my mornings when I go out to do my exercise in the mornings, I like that time to myself. I like just being quiet at the Like where at least right now in Miami, when I go out at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's still dark. And I love just that time. I feel that it's just me and the stars. It's me, and it's that quiet moment in this world that is ours. And for those brief moments of being alone, you just feel such a connection to our creator. You feel your connection to this giant entity that is floating around in space. It's the whole concept of being able to have the energy of our earth pulsating through our bodies with each step. And just those moments that you're there and you're able to go ahead and just feel, you feel in awe of what's around you. And I love that. And if everybody can go ahead and find a moment or two during their day to try to go ahead and do that, I think, oh, what a blessing that would be in their lives.
The next question, Guillermo, I think you answered this already in the question number one. However, we wanted you to expound it more. The question is, failure is a natural part of journey towards triumph. How can we reframe our perception of failure and use it as a stepping stone towards achieving our goals?
I mean, you're talking to a person who has had this lifelong fear and complete resistance to failure. It's like, I've never wanted to fail, and anything that I could go ahead and do to not fail, I would do. And I think I touched upon that in episode 3, was the whole concept that I thought that I had hacked life. I think, remember that I mentioned the fact that I didn't want to experience pain, because to me, failure equates pain, and pain equates failure. So why would I want to go ahead and experience that? So I wanted to take my lessons from everybody else. I would see, oh, what did they do that caused them pain? What did he do that caused him to fail? What did she do that caused her to stumble? And I was thinking, like, oh, so I'm going to learn from each and every one of those people. So I considered myself a student of life. I was like, oh, I'm a student of people. I am a student of life. I'm going to hack life, right? And then it happened. I had my own trauma that I never thought would happen. And that trauma resulted from I was an attorney, and I ended up losing my law license. And it was because I put my faith in the wrong people. But at the end of the day, I failed. And it was something that I could not overcome for a while. But eventually I was able to understand that my life wasn't over. My life was not one that was completely lost. I was again able to stand up. I was able to take that first step toward the unknown, something that to me in the past would have been so hard, because I was going back to that prior question about uncertainty and the liking of uncertainty, or the dislike rather. I was that one person. I hated uncertainty. I wanted to be a person that I knew where I was going. I was a person that I knew what I needed to do. I was a person that I knew the steps that I needed to take. And so I wouldn't walk in through a door that I did not know what was on the other side. And so when I've experienced my trauma, at least that first major trauma, if you will, where I experienced that I felt that my life was over, if you will, it took time for me to realize that, no, my life was not over. It took time for me to realize, let me go ahead and take a step towards something that I never thought I would take. And so I proceeded in the direction of, I eventually started working in an industry that I was not in any way related with or related to. And I learned everything that I could about it. And then I eventually became an executive in a company that I helped start. And I am now on this episode, this podcast episode, talking to you, John, and our fellow listeners about resilience, about overcoming, about failure, and the other side of it. And the fact that I'm here and finding this as a platform to be able to talk to so many people about it is very freeing, in terms of I was able to take my failure and make that into an opportunity. Again, it goes back to what's the blessing, what's the gift, what's the lesson. And perhaps that's still one of the main questions that I have. I'm going to be very honest with you. That's one of the main questions as to I still have. Why did it have to happen to me? But I always answer that question, why not? Why not? Why did that not have to happen to me? Why? Because at the end of the day, if I had not had that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with you. I probably wouldn't be having this conversation with our followers, telling them about resilience. And maybe that's the calling. Maybe that was the reason. And that maybe I use that maybe not as a toss out word, because at the end of the day, I'm embracing the life that I have. I'm happy where I am. And I love the fact that I'm able to go ahead and share these conversations. But that maybe goes back to that Guillermo that was. He would never have thought that he would have been here in this seat having this conversation with you. He would have known what exactly he was going to go ahead and do and what he was going to do next. And even though I have a great idea of what I'm going to do next, I still take the time to embrace the things that I don't know. And it goes back to that former question, because I can go ahead and still condense it even further to something that I do know. I can go ahead and take that next step. I can go ahead and say that next word. I can go ahead and give that next smile. I can go ahead and give that warm embrace. And that's something that's a calling to me. And I love that. I love that. And that's exciting about being able, that's the exciting thing about being able to realize what the gifts are, what the blessings are, what the lessons are, especially in these moments when we don't know what's next. Especially when we think about, we're overcoming a challenge or where we failed. Because that failure became a next win, or it became a stepping stone to your next win. And that's one of the things that I love to remind myself of.
Thank you so much for that, Guillermo, because all the struggles that you have, we cannot wait to see you on the stage and talk about it and then inspire us about it. I think that failure that you faced before can be transmute or can be converted into to be a blessings to other people just like me, to be motivated.
And to me too. And to me too. I mean, that's the thing. It's like all failures, all challenges eventually become blessings. And that really that's the one thing that we need to remind ourselves.
Yeah, stories, blessing. But the next question is, have you observed any common strategies or coping mechanism that individuals use to stay motivated and persevere during tough times? What is your favorite strategy to stay motivated during tough times?
You know, I one of the things that I've been doing recently is I listen to this motivational, it's a motivational talk. Yes, even I listen to a motivational talk. But there's this speaker called Brian Bullock, and his speech, it's a, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 9 to 12 minute talk. And I listen to that every single morning on my exercise. And I start my day with it because it really goes back to the power of words. It really goes back, and those words are a symbol of our thoughts. And so he has this way of speaking, and I, to the point that I start speaking it with him every single morning. And I just, I feel that that's my additional armor that I put on every single day, because at the end of the day, I know that I am strong. I know that I am resilient. And he goes back, he says, instead of saying what you're not, say what you are. And it's true. And if we keep reminding ourselves, if we keep asking ourselves, what is the gift? What is the blessing? What's the lesson? then you're never going to go ahead and feel overwhelmed. Again, I was recently on a call with that group of friends that I was speaking about, and somebody said to the point of, he said, I was recently reading a book where it says that worry is the opposite of gratitude, and therefore it stands to reason that gratitude is the opposite of worry. So when we're worried, we're not grateful. And so when we're grateful, we're not worried. How many times do we feel anxiety? It's like, I know that I'm an anxious person. I know that I'm making efforts to overcome that. It's like nobody is perfect. But when I find myself being engulfed by anxiety, when I find myself anxious, when I find myself worried, when I find myself a little bit on edge because I don't have control of something, or I don't have control of a situation that I feel I should be in control of, I become grateful. I turn to gratitude. And that shift, that moment of being grateful for the things that I have, for the things for who I am, who I've been able to become, for the people that I'm able to help, for these conversations such as the ones that we're having today, I think that's special. And that shifts that mind frame, that shifts that mindset of worry. And it gives us an further ammunition to overcome. And so when you ask me, like, do I know of tricks? Yes, these are the tricks that I use. And there, of course, there are so many others. I have so many friends who meditate, and I, myself included, I'm doing at least a 10-minute truly dedicated visualization a day where I win my day. And sometimes I do it in the morning, sometimes I do it in the evenings. Like if I were to do it in the morning, I imagine what my day is going to be like that day. And then if I do it in the evenings, I go back through my day and I visualize how my day could have been even better, what my perfect day would have been. And by doing that, I go back and change it. I go back and change something negative that could have happened, and I become grateful for it because it allowed me the opportunity of reflecting. And so I think those are a lot of tools that we can go ahead and use: the meditation, the asking yourself, the truly talk to yourself. It's like I had this calculus teacher when I was in high school, and he would always make the joke. He goes, you all will probably see me walking along the hallways talking to myself. And he goes, the only time this will ever be a problem is if I start answering. And I always laughed about that. But sometimes it's like as an adult, I start doing the same thing. I talk to myself and I answer myself. I answer myself when I ask those questions, like, what's the gift? What's the blessing? What's the lesson? I answer myself. The gift is, the lesson is, the blessing is. Because I need to talk to myself, because you know how sometimes you have to talk things out, and many people think that talking things out automatically or naturally requires a second person. No, that's not true. You can go ahead and talk to yourself, and you can talk about something. You can go ahead and really think it out, talk it out. And additionally, there's always God who's there with you. And when you're talking to yourself, that answer, you'd be surprised how many times it's God answering. And that really, at least that gives me so much peace, especially in those moments where I am truly anxious. But then I change to gratitude and I say, wow, I'm a child of God. Or wow, I'm on this earth, or I'm able at I appreciate the fact that I'm able to discern this question, or I'm able to discern this worry, or I'm able to be here. I'm able to take a deep breath to calm myself down. Those are just, being grateful is a big, big, big action item and a big step to be able to overcome the moments where we feel at our darkest, and the moments where we feel that that you don't know what else to do. You'd be surprised what comes to your mind when you're grateful.
Well, thank you so much for that tips, Guillermo, because as you may know, I'm always alone. I'm alone in my apartment here in Asia. So talking to yourself is much better as long as you don't laugh at yourself. You as long as you
You
don't laugh
know,
alone.
when you laugh alone, but sometimes, laughing alone, I am a jovial person, and that sometimes I tell myself some jokes and I start cracking up. And I've been guilty of this. I'm in my office and sometimes I'm just laughing because I remember a joke that somebody said, or I remember something funny and I just start laughing. And most of the times it's like I'm laughing at myself. I'm laughing at myself,
Mm-mm.
but the funny thing is am I really laughing at myself or am I laughing with myself? It's like I'm not taking myself too seriously that I'm unable to laugh with myself, and that's what one of the great things about it. And so that keeps me happy. That keeps me grounded. That keeps me from my head getting too big. Because at the end of the day, who is anyone to not be able to laugh at themselves or with themselves? Because we all are funny beings. We're all funny creatures, and there is this energy that laughter emits. There's this energy that joy emits. That we should continue doing that. It's like even the movie Monsters Inc. I don't know if you've seen it, John, but it's like the movie Monsters
Yes.
Inc. It's like how did the movie start? They were collecting screams because they were collecting the energy of fear. And at the end, they resulted that the energy of joy, the energy of laughter, the energy of excitement was 10 times or multiple times more powerful than fear. And I love that because at the end of the day, that is something that we should really remember. It's like joy is so powerful, and we should try to be as happy and as joyous and as joyful and excited as possible.
Can you share some inspiring stories of individuals who have overcome significant obstacles in their lives or who may have inspired you? And what valuable lesson can we learn from their experience?
Oh, there are so many stories. The first one that comes to mind right now is the story of Helen Keller. It's
Mm-mm.
interesting because today my the quote that we posted was about Helen Keller. But Helen Keller was able to overcome so much. I mean, she was born deaf, she was born blind, that she was born
Mm.
mute, and through the help of someone was able to overcome these challenges and become all the better. And so that is just one story of the many. I mean, so many times how we have overcome. You see, I love watching the Olympics and I love watching the Paralympics because seeing what they are able to do. It's like the Paralympics. When I was younger, I actually, I actually volunteered at a Paralympic tennis championship where the tennis players were wheelchair bound. So yeah, so one of the like I was saying, John, the whole concept about it is like I'm always in awe about Paralympic athletes. I used to when I was in high school, I volunteered at a Paralympic a tennis match and a tennis event. And I was so impressed with the fact that these tennis players were playing tennis in wheelchairs. I've also been privy of being able to see a charity basketball wheelchair basketball game, and just to be able to see what they're capable of is empowering. How is it that these people can go ahead and not allow their physical limitations to stop them from doing something that they truly love? And so those are just a few examples of the things of the stories and experiences that I've been able to witness that I am so in awe of. And that I use that when I'm feeling myself, oh, I can't do this. I remember, well, so and so can. Why can't I? And again, you ask that question, or I ask that question, it's like, why me? Then I always reframe that question to why not me? And then that gives me more opportunities for growth. It gives me more opportunities to be more aware of the fact that, wow, this challenge is not insurmountable. This challenge is not impossible.
It's like a warrior. Bring it on.
Yes, we all are warriors.
Thank you so much, Guillermo, for wonderful episode, for all the learnings and the tips, and then for all the things that you've shared. Thank you so much for those, Guillermo. I think that concludes our episode for today, Overcoming Obstacles, Inspiring Stories of Resilience and Triumph. Guillermo, can you tell them the takeaways?
My first takeaway is always asking those questions. Like ask yourself those questions in the middle of your challenge. Ask yourself, what's the gift? What's the blessing? What's the lesson? If you're able to ask yourself those three questions, you know that you're already better on your way to being able to overcome that challenge, because you're going to start looking at it from a different point of view. And then as you keep going and as you keep overcoming your challenges, your zone of comfort becomes all the much bigger. And that zone of comfort, that's an example of being resilient. The more challenges you overcome, the stronger your armor becomes, and the more resilient you become. Because then you can go ahead and say, oh, this is a challenge, bring it on. Just like John, you just said. It's the whole concept of like, we are warriors. We're warriors, and we're going through this life. And who's going to win? Is life going to win, or are we going to win? Are we going to own this life, or is life going to own us? And the idea is that we have to own this life. We're only on this world now. We're only living this life once, so we might as well own it. We might as well make it the best of it. And whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, whenever you're feeling doubt, think of all the other people that are around you. You don't even need to think about famous people. You can think about your neighbor. Think about the challenges that he or she has overcome. Those challenges are unique to them, but they're not universally unique. And so when you think about the fact that they've overcome challenges, and look at your history, look at the fact that you have been able to overcome something in the past. This is not the first time you've overcome something. This is not the first time that you've gone through something, and you've been able to overcome something. And remember to take that first step. Whenever you take that first step, whenever you don't know what to do, take a step. Break it down even smaller. What is something that you do know how to do? And then when you do know how to do that, take that step. And that is going to make your journey so much easier and so much more rewarding. And so all of you, I wish you all the best as you traverse through this life. And I wish you all the best as you overcome all these challenges, because you know what? I'm with you. I'm overcoming my challenges, and I'm rooting you on, just like I hope you're rooting me on. And if you want to know more, please be sure to follow. Please be sure to like our podcast. Please be sure to like our page on YouTube. And if you want to know more, we're available on all the different channels, social media channels. We're on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and we're even on TikTok. And this podcast is available on all major platforms. So thank you. And from my heart to yours, a warm embrace.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us by liking and subscribing to our channel. Your small gesture means the world to us and helps us continue creating more content like this. See you in the next video.